He abandoned me for 13 years. When he came back, I discovered the secret. His father hid the glass slipped from Victoria Chen's trembling fingers, shattering against the polished hardwood floor of Bennett's steakhouse. Across the crowded dining room, seated beneath the amber glow of a vintage chandelier, was a face that haunted 13 years of her memories, Daniel Morrison. The man who vanished from her life without explanation during their final semester at Stanford, leaving nothing but questions and a heart that took years to mend. She stood frozen between tables, her server's apron suddenly feeling like chains. The tray of appetizers she carried tilted dangerously as her arms went numb. It couldn't be him. Yet those eyes, that jawline, the way he tilted his head when listening intently, she'd know them anywhere, even after all this time. "Victoria, you okay?" Her co-worker Louise touched her elbow, steadying the tray. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, she had. A ghost of a future that never came to be. Daniel sat surrounded by executives in expensive suits, their conversation animated with the kind of energy that comes from celebrating success. He looked different now, sharper edges where there had been softness, designer clothes replacing the vintage band shirts he'd lived in. But it was unmistakably him, the physics major who'd sketched renewable energy designs on coffee shop napkins and promised they'd change the world together. "Table 14 needs their drinks," Louise prompted gently, snapping her back to reality. Victoria nodded mechanically, adjusting her grip on the tray. At 34, she hadn't imagined she'd still be serving tables at one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, but life had a way of derailing plans. When her father's construction accident left him permanently disabled 3 years ago, someone had to keep the family afloat. Her younger brother was still in college. Her mother worked 2 jobs already, and Victoria's dreams of environmental law school became just another casualty of circumstance. She took the long route around the dining room, avoiding Daniel's section entirely. As she delivered craft cocktails to a couple celebrating their anniversary, fragments of memory ambushed her. The way Daniel used to trace equations on her palm while they studied. Their first kiss under the cherry blossoms on campus. The promise rings they'd exchanged. Simple silver bands engraved with coordinates of where they first met. The morning she woke to find him gone, his dorm room empty, his phone disconnected, his family claiming they didn't know where he'd moved. "Miss, could we get another bottle of the Pinot?" The woman's voice pulled Victoria from her thoughts. "Absolutely. Excellent choice," she replied with her practiced smile, the one that hid everything. She had no choice but to approach table 9 eventually. The restaurant's owner, Mr. Bennett himself, had materialized beside Daniel's group, his presence signaling their VIP status. As Victoria approached, her palms grew slick with perspiration. "Gentlemen, you're in exceptional hands tonight," Bennett announced, placing a hand on Victoria's shoulder. "Victoria here is one of our finest. She'll ensure everything is perfect." 7 pairs of eyes turned toward her, all except Daniel's. He remained absorbed in studying the wine list, his brow furrowed in concentration that felt painfully familiar. "We'll begin with champagne," declared an older man with silver temples and an air of authority. "Celebrating a major breakthrough today." "Wonderful, sir," Victoria managed, her voice steadier than her hands. "May I tell you about tonight's chef specials?" She recited the menu from muscle memory, her mind elsewhere. As she described the wild salmon preparation, she felt the weight of someone's gaze. Slowly, Daniel lifted his eyes from the menu, and their worlds collided. Time fractured. The restaurant noise faded. His expression cycled through recognition, shock, something that looked like pain, before settling into polite professional detachment. "That all sounds perfect," he said, his voice deeper now, carrying authority. "We'll trust your recommendations." He didn't acknowledge knowing her, not even a flicker of their shared history. Victoria collected the menus with numb fingers and retreated to the kitchen, her chest tight. In the controlled chaos of the kitchen, she leaned against the stainless steel prep counter, fighting for composure. Steam from the industrial dishwashers fogged her vision, or maybe those were tears. "You good?" Luis asked, sliding past with a loaded tray. "Fine," she lied. Through the kitchen's circular window, she watched Daniel laugh at something a colleague said. He looked successful, powerful, completely at ease in a world of wealth and influence. What had happened to the idealistic student who wanted to solve the energy crisis? The boy who'd rather debate carbon footprints than attend fraternity parties. The evening crawled forward. Victoria maintained her professionalism, refilling water glasses, delivering courses, vanishing between tasks. Daniel never gave any sign of recognition, though occasionally she caught him watching her with an unreadable expression when he thought she wasn't looking. By the time dessert arrived, Victoria had convinced herself he truly didn't remember. 13 years was a lifetime. She'd changed too. Her hair, once long and wild, now fell in a practical cut. The carefree girl who dreamed of saving the planet through policy reform had been replaced by a woman carved thin by responsibility and sacrifice. The group lingered over coffee and cognac, their conversation touching on technical matters. Victoria moved efficiently around them, catching fragments about revolutionary battery technology, sustainable infrastructure, venture capital negotiations. One man leaned toward Daniel with obvious respect. "Your vision could transform entire cities, Morrison, not just for the wealthy, but for everyone." Daniel's response surprised her. That's always been the point. Technology isn't meaningful unless it's accessible. We're not just building better batteries. We're building a more equitable future. It sounded like the Daniel she'd known. Perhaps some part of him had survived the transformation into whatever he'd become. As midnight approached, the restaurant emptied. Victoria's feet ached, but Daniel's table showed no signs of leaving. Finally, the men gathered their belongings. The silver-haired executive produced a corporate credit card. "Charge everything to Morrison Energy Solutions," he instructed, adding, "and include a generous gratuity for outstanding service." Victoria's hands shook as she processed the payment. Morrison Energy Solutions. So he'd done it. He'd built the company they'd once planned together, sitting in her dorm room, mapping out a future powered by clean energy. As she returned with the receipt, the executives filed past her with perfunctory thanks. Daniel remained, adjusting his watch, checking his phone. When they were alone, he looked up. "You haven't changed as much as you think, Victoria Chen." His voice was quiet, intimate. Her breath caught. "So you do remember. I recognized you the moment I walked in." His eyes held hers. "I just wasn't sure if you'd want anyone to know our history." Before she could respond, he pulled a business card from his jacket and placed it on the table. "I'm in Seattle for 3 weeks. We need to talk." "About what?" Victoria found her voice. "It's been 13 years, Daniel. You disappeared like I meant nothing." Pain crossed his features. "I know. And you deserve explanations. More than one." He checked his watch again. "But not here. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, at my office. The address is on the card." Victoria didn't reach for it. "I have responsibilities. My father requires care." "I know about your father," he interrupted softly. "About law school. About everything you gave up." He slid the card closer. "I know more than you might think, Vic." The old nickname sent electricity through her. How did he know about her life? Had he been watching from afar all these years? "Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, he repeated. "What I need to tell you, it changes everything." With that cryptic statement, he stood and walked away, leaving her staring at the embossed card. Turning it over, she found a handwritten note in familiar handwriting. "Some promises just take longer to keep." Her heart hammered as she slipped the card into her pocket. What could he possibly mean? If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more tales of second chances and unexpected reunions, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories like Victoria and Daniel's journey. As Victoria finished closing duties, her mind spun with possibilities. Why had Daniel Morrison, apparently now a successful clean energy entrepreneur, returned to her life? And why did it matter so much that she was already rearranging tomorrow's schedule to make that meeting? Victoria studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror the next morning, dark circles betraying her sleepless night. Daniel's business card sat on the counter, its message taunting her. Some promises just take longer to keep. You don't owe him anything, she told her reflection firmly. But curiosity was a relentless companion. Why had he vanished? Why return now? And how did he know about her father's accident? About the law school acceptance she'd deferred indefinitely? A crash from downstairs interrupted her thoughts. Victoria rushed down to find her father, Robert Chen, struggling with his walker near the kitchen. At 59, the former construction foreman was still adjusting to his limited mobility, the result of a scaffolding collapse that crushed his spine and ended his career. "Dad, you should have called me," Victoria said, helping him to a chair. "I can make my own damn coffee," Robert muttered, but his hands shook as he accepted her help. The frustration in his eyes never got easier to witness. "Carmen's running late today," Victoria said, checking her phone for messages from her father's daytime caregiver. "Something about her car." "You have that interview today," Robert reminded her, "for the paralegal position." Victoria hesitated. That was the lie she'd told her family about taking time off. "Actually, I'm meeting someone. From college." Robert's expression sharpened. "Daniel Morrison." Victoria stared at her father. "How did you know?" "Saw his picture in the tech section last week. Big article about his company going public." Robert's jaw tightened. "That boy broke you, Victoria. Took you years to put yourself back together." "I was 21, Dad. Everyone has heartbreak in college." "Don't minimize it. You stopped eating for weeks. Stopped going to classes. If your roommate hadn't called us, you might have failed out entirely." Victoria had forgotten how bad those months had been. Or maybe she'd forced herself to forget. "What does he want?" Robert asked. "I don't know, but I need to find out." She squeezed her father's hand. "For closure, if nothing else." Robert studied her face. "Just be careful." Rich men with guilty consciences are dangerous. Morrison Energy Solutions occupied 5 floors of a gleaming tower in Seattle's tech corridor. Victoria's stomach churned as the elevator climbed to the 42nd floor. The doors opened to reveal a breathtaking lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. The space perfectly captured what Daniel had always talked about: sustainable materials, natural light, biophilic design elements that brought the outside in. "Can I help you?" asked a receptionist at a desk made from reclaimed wood. "Victoria Chen. I have a 3 o'clock with Mr. Morrison." "Of course, Ms. Chen. He's expecting you." The receptionist offered no curiosity, just professional courtesy. "This way, please." Victoria was led through an open workspace where engineers and designers collaborated at standing desks and project tables. The walls displayed patents, awards, photographs of solar installations and wind farms. Morrison Energy Solutions was clearly an industry leader. The receptionist stopped at a glass office. "Mr. Morrison will join you shortly." Alone, Victoria absorbed the space. A massive desk made from sustainable bamboo dominated one side. But what captured her attention were the framed sketches on the walls, hand-drawn designs on coffee shop napkins and notebook paper. She approached one and gasped. In the corner, in Daniel's handwriting, was a date from their junior year and 2 sets of initials, DM and VC. "You inspired that design." Daniel's voice came from behind her. Victoria turned. He wore jeans and a casual button-down, looking less like a CEO and more like the student she'd known. "You kept our napkin sketches," she said, struggling for composure. "I kept everything, Vic. He closed the door, moving further into the room. "Please, sit." They settled in a seating area, silence stretching between them. Up close, Victoria saw the changes time had wrought. Fine lines around his eyes, a scar on his left hand, a weariness beneath his confidence. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said finally. "I wasn't certain you would." Curiosity is powerful. Victoria met his gaze, especially when someone who vanished from your life suddenly claims to have been keeping tabs on you. Daniel winced. "I deserve that and worse." He stood, walking to the windows. "Why did you leave, Daniel?" "One day we were planning our future, mapping out graduate schools, talking about which cities had the best environmental law programs and renewable energy research. The next day you were gone." Daniel stared out at the water, his back to her. "My father gave me an ultimatum. End things with you immediately, or lose everything." Victoria stared at him. "Because of me. Your parents always seemed to like me." "They did, but they had different plans." He turned to face her, his expression grim. "The day before I disappeared, my father accepted an offer from his business partner, Gregory Sullivan. You remember him?" Victoria nodded. The Sullivans were Seattle royalty, old money from timber and shipping, with connections spanning generations. My father and Gregory had arranged for their children to date, with an eventual merger through marriage. Their daughter Madison was in our graduating class. Victoria remembered Madison Sullivan, beautiful, polished, completely uninterested in anything outside her social circle. "And you just agreed?" Victoria couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. "No." Daniel's response was firm. "I refused. Told my father I loved you, that we had plans. That's when he threatened to cut me off entirely." He ran his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that still made her heart ache. "But I still refused. So he changed tactics. He threatened you." "Me?" Victoria whispered. "Your law school acceptances. Your father's union contract." Daniel's eyes held old pain. "My father sat on multiple boards. He had the influence to make sure your scholarship offers disappeared, that your father's company lost the contracts keeping it afloat." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "So you left to protect me?" "I was on a plane to Hong Kong within 24 hours. My father had secured me a position at his partner's engineering firm there. No phone, no internet access without monitoring, no way to contact you." His voice hardened. "And when I tried to email you, the messages were blocked. When I attempted to call from a colleague's phone, your number had been changed." Victoria's mind raced. Her mysteriously revoked Yale acceptance that had been suddenly reinstated months after Daniel disappeared. Her father's company receiving that unexpected contract extension around the same time. "I thought I wasn't good enough," she said quietly. "I wondered what I'd done wrong, why you could just walk away." Daniel moved to kneel before her chair, not touching her, but close enough that she could see the regret carved into his features. "You were everything, Victoria. You were the reason I fought my way free." His voice was intense. "Every patent I filed, every company I built, it was all to gain enough power that my father could never threaten either of us again." 13 years, Daniel," Victoria said, her voice cracking. "You could have found a way once you were free. By the time I'd established myself, 6 years had passed. I looked you up, saw you were engaged." His face clouded. "To Christopher Barnes. I thought you'd moved on, found happiness." "I didn't want to disrupt your life." Victoria flinched at the mention of her ex-fiancé. "Chris and I broke up 4 years ago." "I know," Daniel admitted. "I've kept track of you, Vic, not in a creepy way," he added quickly. "But I needed to know you were okay. When I heard about your father's accident, about you giving up law school to care for him, I wanted to help. But I didn't know how to re-enter your life without seeming like a billionaire swooping in to save the day." Victoria suggested, bitterness creeping in. Something like that, he acknowledged with a rueful smile. So why now? Victoria asked. Why reach out after all this time? Daniel returned to his seat, leaning forward intently. 2 reasons. First, my father died 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry, Victoria said automatically, though Daniel's expression suggested their relationship had never healed. Don't be. His death freed me from his last hold. He paused. But more importantly, it led me to discover something. Daniel reached for a folder on the coffee table. Have you ever wondered why your father's disability payments are significantly higher than standard workers' compensation? Victoria frowned, confused. His union negotiated a good package. True, but there's something else. Daniel handed her the folder. Your father has had a silent benefactor since his accident. Someone who ensured his medical bills were covered, that your family received financial support beyond what insurance provided. Victoria opened the folder to find legal documents with a name highlighted, Robert Chen Disability Trust. The funding source made her breath catch. Morrison Energy Solutions. That's impossible, Victoria whispered. Your company didn't even exist 3 years ago. My first company did, Daniel corrected. Morrison Technology Solutions, which I sold to establish Morrison Energy. The trust was set up shortly after your father's accident. Victoria struggled to process this. But why? We hadn't spoken in years. Because I never stopped caring about you or your family. Daniel's eyes held hers. And because I knew that if our situations were reversed, you would have done the same for me. Before Victoria could respond, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I need to take this. It's my CFO, he answered, his expression growing more concerned as he listened. When? And you're certain it wasn't an accident? Yes, I understand. I'll be there tomorrow morning. He ended the call and turned to Victoria, his face grim. I'm sorry, but there's an emergency I need to address. Someone sabotaged equipment at our Portland manufacturing facility. 3rd incident this month. That sounds serious, Victoria said. It's corporate warfare, Daniel replied dismissively. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. He hesitated. I have to fly to Portland tonight, but I'd like to continue this conversation when I return. There's still so much I need to tell you. Victoria clutched the folder, her world tilting. I need time, Daniel, to process all of this, to talk to my father. Of course. Take all the time you need. He scribbled on a notepad and tore off the page. This is my personal number. Call me when you're ready. As Victoria stood to leave, Daniel gently touched her arm. Just know that whatever you decide about the trust, about seeing me again, it doesn't change what I came back to tell you. His voice dropped. I never stopped loving you, Victoria Chen. Not for a single day in 13 years. Victoria sat across from her father at their kitchen table, the folder from Daniel spread between them. Robert's hands trembled as he examined the documents, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and something that looked like anger. Dad, Victoria prompted gently. Did you know about any of this? The payments from Daniel's company? Robert closed his eyes. When he opened them, they held a resignation that told Victoria he knew more than he'd let on. I suspected, Robert admitted quietly. Not specifically that it was Daniel's doing, but the payments were always too generous, too convenient. I thought maybe it was the union, or the construction company trying to avoid a lawsuit. Why didn't you tell me? Victoria asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Because you were finally moving on. Robert reached for his coffee with shaking hands. After Daniel left, you were devastated for years. Then you met Chris, started to smile again, made plans for law school. When you had to defer to help with my care, I felt guilty enough. If I'd told you Daniel Morrison might be secretly paying our bills. He shook his head. And that would have torn you apart all over again. Victoria leaned back in her chair, absorbing this. So you let me think we were barely scraping by when we actually had more support than I knew. We are barely scraping by, Robert corrected. Those payments cover my medical expenses and some of the bills. But your income from Bennett's is what keeps us afloat. Don't think for a second that you haven't been carrying this family, Victoria. That's not what I meant, Victoria said softly. I know. Robert's expression softened. But I need you to understand something. Daniel Morrison left you once. Rich men don't change just because they get richer. He said his father forced him to leave, Victoria explained. Threatened to destroy our family if Daniel didn't end things with me. Robert's jaw tightened. That sounds like Thomas Morrison. That man was ruthless. He paused. But Daniel was 21 years old, Victoria. Old enough to make his own choices. Old enough to fight back or at least tell you the truth. He said he tried, Victoria argued, though doubt crept in. That his father blocked his attempts to contact me. For 13 years, Robert asked pointedly. At some point, excuses stopped being valid. Victoria knew her father had a point, yet she couldn't shake the intensity in Daniel's eyes when he'd said he never stopped loving her. Her phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was unfamiliar. Patricia Reynolds Consulting, Calm. The subject line made her stomach drop. The truth about Daniel Morrison. Against her better judgment, Victoria opened the email. Ms. Chen, you don't know me, but I know about you. Daniel Morrison has not been honest about his motives or his past. Before you trust him with your future, you should know what he's really capable of. Meet me tomorrow at noon, Reynolds Building lobby. Come alone. Patricia Reynolds. Victoria stared at the screen. Patricia Reynolds. The name meant nothing to her. What is it? Robert asked, noticing his daughter's troubled expression. Victoria hesitated only briefly before showing him the email. Robert read it twice, his lips thinning. You can't possibly be considering meeting this woman, Robert said firmly. It could be dangerous. It's in a public place, Dad. And what if there's more to Daniel's story? What if he's not being completely truthful? And what if this is a trap set by people who want to stop whatever Daniel is planning? Robert countered. This woman could have her own agenda. Victoria knew her father was right to be cautious, but curiosity and doubt had already taken root. I'll be careful, she promised. But I need all the facts before I decide anything about Daniel, about this trust, about our future. Robert squeezed her hand. Just promise me you won't go alone. I promise, Victoria agreed, already wondering who she could trust to accompany her to such a strange meeting. But as she helped her father to bed that evening, her mind kept returning to one question. What secret could Patricia Reynolds possibly reveal about Daniel Morrison? And would it destroy the fragile hope that had begun to bloom in her chest? The Reynolds Building's marble lobby was crowded with midday foot traffic when Victoria arrived, her heart racing despite Carmen's reassuring presence beside her. She'd asked her father's caregiver to come along, unwilling to break her promise to Robert but not wanting to involve anyone else in this strange situation. You sure about this? Carmen asked, her dark eyes scanning the lobby with the wariness of someone who'd grown up in rough neighborhoods. No, Victoria admitted, but I need to know. Ms. Chen? A voice called from behind them. Victoria turned to find a woman in her mid-50s approaching. With her tailored navy suit and silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into an elegant chignon, Patricia Reynolds exuded the confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and power lunches. Thank you for meeting me, Patricia said, extending a manicured hand. Her gaze flickered to Carmen with barely concealed curiosity. This is Carmen, my colleague, Victoria said vaguely. I prefer not to meet strangers alone. Something like respect crossed Patricia's face. Wise. There's a cafe on the mezzanine level, more private than down here. Minutes later, they were seated in a quiet corner booth, 3 untouched lattes between them. Patricia studied Victoria with unsettling intensity. "You look like your father," Patricia finally said. Same determined expression. Victoria straightened. "You know my father." "I know of him," Patricia clarified. "Robert Chen, one of the best construction foremen in Seattle before his accident. He worked on several Sullivan properties over the years." "Sullivan?" Victoria felt a chill. "As in Madison Sullivan's family?" "Madison is my niece," Patricia confirmed. "I'm Gregory Sullivan's younger sister." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a folder. "I'm here because history has a way of repeating itself, and you deserve to know exactly what you're walking into with Daniel Morrison." She slid the folder across the table. Inside, Victoria found newspaper clippings, photographs, and legal documents spanning the past decade. Headlines jumped out at her. Morrison Tech acquires struggling Green Spark Solutions. Sullivan Properties loses major contract to Morrison Energy. Environmental engineers suicide shocks industry. "What is this?" Victoria asked, dread building as she examined the materials. "Daniel's path to power," Patricia replied coldly. "Not the romantic redemption story he's likely painted for you, but a systematic destruction of anyone who stood in his way." She tapped a photograph of a handsome young man with kind eyes. "This is Trevor Hughes, brilliant environmental engineer who made the mistake of dating Madison after she and Daniel ended their brief relationship." Victoria's fingers stilled on the photograph. "What happened to him?" "Daniel used his growing influence to block Trevor's projects, poach his clients, and eventually force him to sell his struggling firm to Morrison Tech at a fraction of its value." Patricia's voice hardened. 8 months later, Trevor jumped from the Aurora Bridge. The ruling was suicide. Victoria's stomach churned. "You're suggesting Daniel was responsible for this man's death?" "That's a serious accusation." "I'm suggesting Daniel Morrison will stop at nothing to get what he wants." Patricia leaned forward. "His obsession with the Sullivan family went far beyond business. He dated Madison briefly, gained access to family connections and trade secrets, then used that information to systematically dismantle everything we'd built over 3 generations. That's not how Daniel described it," Victoria countered, though doubt crept into her voice. "I'm sure it wasn't." Patricia's smile was bitter. "Did he tell you about the sustainable housing initiative my brother had already launched before Daniel's intervention? Or how his acquisition of Sullivan Properties actually stalled those projects for 18 months while families waited for affordable homes?" Victoria felt increasingly unsettled. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" "To warn you." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Thomas Morrison warped his son in ways that may not be fixable. Daniel's obsession with you, and yes, we've known about it for years, has driven every decision he's made. That kind of single-minded fixation isn't love, Ms. Chen, it's possession." "You make him sound like some kind of monster," Victoria said shakily. "Not a monster, a product of his upbringing," Patricia corrected. Thomas Morrison raised his son to believe that power was the only protection against vulnerability, that control was synonymous with love. Daniel may genuinely believe everything he's done has been for you. But ask yourself, did you ever want someone to destroy lives in your name? Before Victoria could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Back from Portland early. Need to see you. It's urgent." Patricia noticed Victoria's reaction. "He knows you're here, doesn't he?" she asked quietly. "I didn't tell him," Victoria replied, confused. Patricia sighed. "Of course you didn't. But Daniel has eyes everywhere. He's probably had you watched since the moment you reconnected." She gathered her belongings. "My purpose was to give you information, not to tell you what to do with it. The choice is yours. Make it with open eyes." As Patricia stood to leave, she hesitated. One last thing. The Sullivan family wasn't always what it became under my brother's leadership. We started as builders of homes for working families, not luxury developments. If Daniel truly intends to return the company to those roots through his acquisitions, perhaps some good can come from all this destruction. She placed a business card on the table. If you ever need anything, advice, help, or just someone who understands the Morrison family, I'm available. After Patricia departed, Victoria remained at the cafe, Carmen sitting quietly beside her as she examined the documents. "This is heavy stuff," Carmen finally said. "You okay?" "I don't know what to believe," Victoria admitted. "Daniel told me one story. She's telling me another. Somewhere in between is the truth." "What does your gut say?" Carmen asked. Victoria thought about the boy who'd sketched clean energy solutions on napkins, who'd talked about making technology accessible to everyone. Then she thought about the documents in front of her, the trail of destroyed companies and broken lives. "My gut says," Victoria began slowly, "that people are complicated. Maybe both stories are true. Maybe Daniel did terrible things while also believing he was doing them for good reasons." "That's pretty philosophical," Carmen observed. "But what are you going to do about it?" Victoria made a decision. She texted Daniel back. "My place, 6 p.m. We need to talk." She spent the afternoon with her father, sharing Patricia Reynolds' revelations and sorting through her confused feelings. By the time Daniel's car pulled up outside their modest craftsman house that evening, she had reached a tentative conclusion, though not one without reservations. She met him at the door, noting immediately the tension in his shoulders, the worry etched around his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, stepping inside, "especially after your meeting with Patricia Reynolds." Victoria crossed her arms. "So you were having me followed?" "Not exactly." Daniel ran his hand through his hair in that familiar gesture. "The Reynolds building has security cameras. Patricia's assistant recognized you from a photograph someone showed him, a photograph from my office, and alerted her. She then alerted me." "That doesn't make it better, Daniel," Victoria said sharply. "I know. I'm sorry." His apology seemed genuine. "But when I heard you were meeting with Patricia, I was concerned. The Sullivans blame me for a lot of things, some justified, some not." "Like Trevor Hughes' suicide?" Victoria asked bluntly. Daniel flinched as if she'd struck him. "She told you about Trevor." "Tell me what happened," Victoria demanded. "The truth, Daniel, all of it." He moved to the window, looking out at the street where children played in the fading evening light. After my father forced our separation, I was broken, angry. When I finally gained some independence after college, I started building my company with a singular focus, acquiring enough power that no one could ever control me again. "And Madison Sullivan?" Victoria prompted. My father still expected me to fulfill the arrangement. I dated Madison briefly, trying to buy time until I could access my full inheritance. His expression darkened. When I finally ended things, she immediately started seeing Trevor Hughes, a talented engineer who'd previously lost contracts to my company. "You targeted his business," Victoria stated. "Yes," Daniel admitted. "I convinced myself it was justified, that he was only with Madison to get back at me. I used every advantage to undermine his company, eventually forcing him to sell to me at a devastating loss. And then he killed himself," Victoria said quietly. Daniel's face contorted with pain. 8 months later, by then I'd discovered through mutual friends that he genuinely loved Madison, that their relationship wasn't about revenge or business at all. He swallowed hard. After his death, Madison forwarded me emails Trevor had written her. Passionate, sincere declarations of love that reminded me of how I felt about you. He turned to face her. It was a wake-up call. I realized I'd become exactly what I hated about my father, someone who destroyed lives to maintain control. "So, you changed your approach?" Victoria said. became the clean energy philanthropist. I tried to channel my resources into something positive, Daniel replied. Sustainable infrastructure, affordable housing, community development, things that would make a difference, things I thought would make you proud. While still systematically acquiring Sullivan properties, Victoria pointed out. Yes, Daniel acknowledged without attempting to justify it. My father's death should have ended that vendetta. Instead, I accelerated it. Completed the acquisitions because I finally felt free to come back to you, and I wanted to close that chapter completely. Victoria studied him. This man who had built an empire, destroyed lives, and reshaped an industry, all while claiming to love her. Did you ever consider that I might not want any of this? That the boy I loved at Stanford wanted to create, not destroy? Every single day, Daniel said softly. But I couldn't find my way back to that boy, not without you. He took a hesitant step toward her. I've made terrible mistakes, Vic. I won't deny them or try to excuse them. But seeing you again, being near you, I feel like maybe I can find my way back to who I was supposed to be. You can't pin your redemption on me, Daniel, Victoria said, tears threatening. That's not fair. You're right, he nodded, his own eyes glistening. And I won't. Whether you want me in your life or not, I'm already taking steps to make amends. Starting with the Hughes Foundation for Environmental Engineers that I established last year. You didn't mention that before, Victoria observed. Because it doesn't erase what I did, Daniel said simply. Nothing can bring Trevor back or undo the pain I caused. But I can try to honor his talent by supporting others like him. A soft cough from the hallway interrupted them. Robert Chen stood there, leaning on his walker, his eyes sharp as they assessed Daniel. Mr. Chen, Daniel said, straightening. It's good to see you again. Robert's expression remained neutral. Is it? Last time I saw you, you were at Victoria's college graduation. You left halfway through and never came back. Dad, Victoria began, but Daniel gently interrupted. He's right, Daniel said, and I owe you both an apology that's 13 years overdue. He moved toward Robert, stopping at a respectful distance. I'm sorry for the pain I caused your family. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight my father's control the way your father did, Robert Chen. Robert studied Daniel for a long moment. Thomas Morrison was a ruthless man. I worked on his properties for years, saw how he treated people. His voice softened slightly. But running from someone isn't the same as standing up to them. I know that now, Daniel acknowledged. And I know that by the time I found my courage, it was too late. The damage was done. Robert looked at his daughter, then back at Daniel. Victoria's mother passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Victoria put her entire life on hold to care for her, just like she's done for me. His eyes held Daniel's steadily. She's spent her whole adult life taking care of other people. Don't you dare add to that burden by making her responsible for fixing you. I won't, Daniel promised. That's my work to do. Robert nodded slowly. There's something you should know. Your father came to see me after my accident. Both Victoria and Daniel stared at him. What? Victoria whispered. About 2 months after I fell, Robert continued, showed up at the rehabilitation center, said he wanted to make amends for how he'd treated our family. Robert's expression was unreadable. He set up that trust fund, made me promise not to tell Victoria, because he didn't want her to feel obligated to Daniel in any way. Daniel looked stunned. My father did that. Said he'd spent his whole life trying to control everyone around him, and it cost him his relationship with his son, Robert explained. Told me he didn't want his mistakes to keep destroying lives. Made me swear not to tell anyone, especially you, Daniel. Why are you telling us now? Victoria asked. Because secrets have done enough damage to this family, Robert replied. And because Daniel needs to know that his father wasn't all bad, just a broken man who tried to fix things the only way he knew how, through money and control. Daniel sank into a chair, processing this revelation. He never told me. Never gave any indication he regretted what he'd done. Pride, Robert said simply. He couldn't face you directly, so he tried to make things right indirectly. He looked at Victoria. That trust fund was his way of trying to give you back what Daniel had to sacrifice. The room fell silent as they absorbed this new understanding. The web of secrets, sacrifices, and misguided attempts at protection had shaped all their lives. What happens now? Victoria finally asked, looking between her father and Daniel. Daniel stood, pulling out another folder from his briefcase. Before my father died, he left me a letter. I only found it last month while going through his papers. He handed it to Victoria. He wanted you to have this. Victoria opened the folder to find a handwritten letter on Thomas Morrison's personal stationery. Dear Victoria, she read aloud, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my son has finally found the courage to come back to you. I owe you an apology that I'll never be able to give in person. I separated you and Daniel because I was afraid of what it meant that my son chose love over duty, over wealth, over the path I'd laid out for him. Your father made that same choice decades ago, and I punished him for it. I convinced myself I was protecting family legacy, maintaining social standing, securing our future. But really, I was just a coward who couldn't face the fact that real strength comes from vulnerability, not control. I've set up provisions to help your family, but money can't fix what I broke. Only Daniel can do that, if you'll let him. And if you won't, I don't blame you. Some things are too broken to repair. I hope my son has learned what I never could, that love is worth more than any empire. With regret, Thomas Morrison. Victoria's hands trembled as she finished reading. Tears streaked down her cheeks. He knew he was dying, Daniel explained quietly. Pancreatic cancer. He had maybe 3 months when he wrote that. Spent his last weeks trying to make amends through legal channels, setting up trusts, transferring assets, ensuring that the people he'd hurt would be taken care of. That doesn't excuse what he did, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its edge. No, it doesn't, Daniel agreed. But maybe it explains it, and maybe it gives us a chance to not repeat his mistakes. Robert cleared his throat. I'm going to leave you two to talk. He maneuvered his walker toward the hallway, then paused. Daniel, my daughter is the strongest person I know, but everyone has limits. Don't test hers. After Robert left, Victoria and Daniel sat in heavy silence. I don't know what to do with all this, Victoria finally said, gesturing vaguely at the letters, the folders, the weight of revelation. It's too much. Too complicated. I know, Daniel said, and I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. But I want to be honest about everything, including my mistakes. He took a deep breath. Patricia was right about some things. I did destroy Sullivan Properties systematically. I did use my relationship with Madison to gain information. And yes, I played a role in Trevor Hughes' death, even if I didn't push him off that bridge myself. Why are you telling me this? Victoria asked. If you want me to give you a chance, why confess to things that make you look worse? Because I'm done with secrets and manipulation, Daniel replied. If we're going to have any kind of relationship, friendship, partnership, whatever it might be, it has to be built on complete honesty. You need to know who I really am, not who I want you to think I am. Victoria studied his face, searching for deception and finding only exhaustion and earnestness. The boy I loved at Stanford, she said slowly. He was idealistic and passionate, and believed he could change the world through innovation. Is any of him left? I don't know, Daniel admitted. But I want to find out. And I think, maybe, you're the only person who can help me figure that out. That's a lot of pressure to put on me, Victoria observed. You're right, I'm sorry. Daniel stood to leave. Take all the time you need. The trust fund is yours regardless. Your father's medical care is covered. There are no strings attached, Victoria. Even if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that. As he moved toward the door, Victoria surprised herself by calling out, "Wait!" Daniel turned, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I need time," Victoria said carefully. "Not years, but time to process everything, to talk to my father, to figure out what I really want." "Of course," Daniel said immediately. "But," Victoria continued, feeling her way through the complexity, "I'm not saying no to seeing you again, just not yet." A tentative smile crossed Daniel's face. "I can work with not yet." "In the meantime," Victoria said, "I want to see everything. The Hughes Foundation, your affordable housing projects, the truth about what you've built, good and bad. I want to understand who you've become, not just who you were or who you're trying to be." "I'd like that," Daniel replied. "And maybe you could tell me about your dreams for the future. Not the deferred ones, but what you want now." "I'd like that too," Victoria found herself saying. After Daniel left, Victoria sat in the quiet house, processing everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "You okay? Need anything?" Victoria smiled and replied, "I'm okay. Thanks for today." Another message came through, this time from Patricia Reynolds. "The offer of help stands whenever you need it. No judgment, whatever you decide." Victoria realized she was surrounded by people trying to help, protect, or guide her. But ultimately, the choice was hers alone. She pulled out Daniel's business card, the one with his personal number, and stared at it for a long moment. Then she texted, "Coffee tomorrow. Just coffee. No heavy conversations. I want to hear about Portland." His response came almost immediately. "I'd love that. Starbucks on Pine, 10 a.m. "See you there," she replied. If you're still with us and want to see how Victoria and Daniel navigate this complicated second chance, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support means everything, and there's so much more of their story to tell. 3 months later, Victoria adjusted the decorations in the window of Chen's Cafe and Bakery. The modest storefront in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space filled with the scent of fresh bread and brewing coffee. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on the simple silver ring she now wore on her right hand, a replica of the promise ring from years ago, though its meaning had evolved. Behind her, Carmen arranged pastries in the display case while Robert supervised from his wheelchair, his health stabilized by consistent care and physical therapy. "Nervous?" Daniel asked, entering through the back door with boxes of supplies. "Terrified," Victoria admitted with a laugh, "but the good kind." The past 3 months had been a journey of careful steps and honest conversations. She'd watched Daniel work to make genuine amends, not through grand gestures, but through consistent action. The Hughes Foundation had expanded to provide mentorship and funding for young engineers. The Sullivan Property Acquisitions had been restructured into a community development partnership, with Patricia Reynolds serving as an advisor. Daniel had even reached out to Madison Sullivan to apologize, a meeting that Victoria had encouraged but not participated in. Their relationship had grown slowly, deliberately. Coffee dates led to longer conversations. Discussions about business evolved into shared planning sessions. She'd shown him her business plan for the cafe, and he'd offered advice without trying to control or finance the project. Instead, he'd connected her with resources, small business mentors, and community partners. The cafe itself was funded partly by the trust Thomas Morrison had established, partly by a small business loan Victoria had secured on her own merits, and partly by community investment from the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Association. It was hers in a way that felt earned, not given. "The mayor's here," Carmen called from the front, peeking through the curtains. Victoria took a deep breath. They'd invited city council members, small business owners, and community leaders to the opening. not because they needed the publicity, but because the cafe was designed to be a community hub. The space offered not just artisanal baked goods, but also job training for young adults, a community bulletin board, and affordable meeting space for local organizations. "Ready?" Daniel asked, offering his hand. Victoria took it, feeling the rightness of the gesture. They weren't rushing toward anything. The engagement ring he'd shown her last week was safely tucked away, waiting for a moment when they both felt certain. They'd agreed that their relationship would unfold at its own pace, built on friendship and mutual respect, rather than the desperate passion of their youth or the complicated obligations of their present. As Victoria prepared to unlock the door for their first customers, she caught sight of a framed photograph on the wall. Not the teenage photo from 13 years ago, but a new image. Victoria and Daniel at the Hughes Foundation Gala, standing beside Madison Sullivan and Patricia Reynolds, former adversaries coming together for a shared purpose. She'd also hung a photo of Trevor Hughes, provided by his sister, along with a plaque dedicating a portion of the cafe's profits to environmental engineering scholarships in his name. Daniel had suggested it, and Victoria had agreed. Some wounds couldn't be healed, but they could be honored. "Thank you for this," Daniel said quietly, noticing where her gaze had landed. "For helping me find a way to remember him properly." "We're doing this together," Victoria replied. "That's what partners do." The word of partners felt right, not just romantic partners, though they were exploring that possibility, but true partners in trying to build something meaningful. As the first customers began to arrive, Victoria's father wheeled over to them. His health had improved remarkably with proper treatment, though he'd never fully recover his mobility, but he'd found new purpose in helping Victoria plan the cafe, sharing his construction knowledge to design an accessible space, and mentoring young people through a workforce development program Daniel's company sponsored. "Your mother would be proud," Robert said to Victoria, his eyes glistening. "Not just of the cafe, but of the person you've become. You didn't let bitterness win." Victoria hugged her father, grateful beyond words for his support. Throughout the opening day, Victoria moved between tables, greeting neighbors and old friends. She saw Luis from Bennett's Steakhouse, where she still picked up occasional shifts to build capital. She saw her former law school advisor, who'd encouraged her to consider reapplying once the cafe was established. She saw people from every phase of her life coming together in this new space she'd created. Daniel worked alongside her, not as the CEO of Morrison Energy Solutions, but as someone willing to wash dishes, bus tables, and do whatever was needed. He'd rolled up his sleeves literally and figuratively, learning to be part of something rather than always leading it. As the day wound down and the last customers departed, Victoria, Daniel, Robert, and Carmen sat together at a table, exhausted but happy. "To new beginnings," Carmen raised her coffee cup. "To second chances," Daniel added. "To earned success," Robert contributed. "To all of us," Victoria concluded, "and to everything we've survived to get here." As they clinked cups, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Reynolds. "Saw the social media posts. The cafe looks beautiful. Proud of what you've built." Another message followed from Madison Sullivan. "Congratulations on the opening. Trevor would have loved the dedication. Thank you." Victoria showed the messages to Daniel. Something shifted in his expression, a lightness that hadn't been there before. "Forgiveness is strange," he said quietly. "You don't always deserve it, but sometimes people give it anyway." "We're all learning," Victoria replied. "You, me, all of us." Later that evening, after everyone had left and Victoria was doing final cleanup, Daniel appeared with a small box. "This isn't the engagement ring," he clarified immediately, seeing her expression. "Just something I wanted you to have." Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with coordinates. Victoria recognized them immediately. The location of that coffee shop at Stanford where they'd first met. "A reminder," Daniel explained, "that some places are worth finding your way back to." even if the journey takes 13 years. Victoria put on the bracelet, feeling its weight settle against her wrist. Thank you. I was thinking, Daniel said carefully, about what comes next. For us. And, Victoria prompted. I don't want to rush anything, he said. But I also don't want to waste more time being afraid. So maybe we could talk about what a future together actually looks like. Not in theory, but in practice. Victoria considered this. I think that sounds good. Scary, but good. Scary is okay, Daniel assured her. Scary means it matters. As they walked out of the cafe together, turning off lights and locking doors, Victoria realized that her life had become something she never could have planned, not the law career she'd once imagined. Not the simple ending where the first love returns and everything is magically fixed, but something more complex, more real, more earned. 6 months after the cafe opening, Victoria stood in the living room of a modest house in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. Not the mansion Daniel could have bought, but a craftsman bungalow they'd chosen together. A home with space for Robert on the ground floor, a studio where Victoria could test new recipes, and a home office where Daniel could work remotely part of the week. The engagement ring was now on her left hand, placed there during a quiet moment at the cafe. No grand gestures or public proposals, just the two of them. After closing time, Daniel asking if she was ready to try again. Victoria saying yes. She thought she was. The wedding plans were still forming, but they'd agreed on a few things. Small ceremony, meaningful vows they'd write themselves, and a celebration at the cafe with the community that had supported them. Package for you, Robert called from the front door, where a delivery person had just departed. Victoria opened the box to find a framed architectural drawing. It was Daniel's original sketch from college, the one he'd drawn on a coffee shop napkin, showing a sustainable community center powered by renewable energy. At the bottom, in faded ink, were their initials and a date from 13 years ago. A note was attached. Found this in storage. Thought you might want it for the house. Some dreams just take longer to build. Love, D. Victoria hung the drawing in the hallway, a bridge between who they'd been and who they were becoming. Her phone rang. It was Carmen, calling about a potential partnership between the cafe and a local youth center. After that, Patricia Reynolds called about a consulting opportunity on affordable housing design. Then Madison Sullivan texted about a potential collaboration between Morrison Energy and Sullivan Properties on a new green building initiative. Life had become full in ways Victoria never anticipated. Not perfect, but purposeful. That evening, as she and Daniel prepared dinner together in their new kitchen, Victoria thought about the question her father had asked months ago. What do you really want? She wanted this. The complicated, messy, earned reality of building something meaningful with someone who'd made mistakes, but was committed to doing better. She wanted the cafe that gave her purpose. She wanted the family she was creating, biological and chosen. She wanted the chance to prove that second chances could work, even when they took 13 years to arrive. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, noticing her expression. About how nothing turned out the way I planned, Victoria replied, and how that's okay. Daniel smiled, pulling her close. Better than okay. Better than okay, she agreed. In the background, Robert was on the phone with his physical therapy team, discussing his progress. Carmen's voice came through the speaker, planning the cafe as first anniversary celebration. The house felt alive with possibilities. Some love stories ended with a kiss. Some ended with a wedding. This one, Victoria realized, didn't really end at all. It just kept unfolding, day by day, choice by choice. Two people who'd lost each other finding their way back, not to who they'd been, but to who they could become together. The coordinates on her bracelet caught the light. The promise ring on her finger felt right. The architectural drawing on the wall reminded her that some dreams took time, but they could still come true. just in different forms than originally imagined. Outside, the Seattle rain began to fall, gentle and steady. Inside, Victoria Chen and Daniel Morrison were building something new from the ruins of what had been not perfect, not simple, but wholly, completely, beautifully theirs. And that, she thought, as Daniel took her hand and they moved together toward whatever came next, was exactly enough. Thank you for staying with us through Victoria and Daniel's journey. If their story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Sometimes, the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be.